In the ancient land of the pharaohs, it's a revolution sparked by the internet. It's a revolution on live TV with the whole world witnessing history. Millions are marching in Cairo. The army has said that it acknowledges the legitimate rights of the people. Egypt is at the center of an earthquake, in fact, which could spread to the rest of the Arab world. The 30-year-old authoritarian regime of Hosni Mubarak is tottering, and we are witnessing a peaceful assertion of people power like never before in the Arab world. The 3-decade-old Mubarak regime in Egypt is tottering. The army has declared that the demands of the protesters are legitimate. The march has proceeded from Tahrir Square, and in fact it is protests in different parts of Egypt as well. Key ally of Egypt, Turkey too, has asked Hosni Mubarak to meet popular demands. The protests have sent shockwaves across the Arab world as many have started emulating the Egyptians. In fact, Jordanian King Abdullah sacked his prime minister today following protests there. We are witnessing history in Egypt, and it is the citizen of Egypt who, after 30 years of authoritarian rule, is bringing about this revolution. Let's go across to a report now on the citizen at the center of this seismic event.
Egypt's biggest march yet, a sea of mostly men and some women at Tahrir or Liberation Square demanding an end to 30 years of President Mubarak's iron control over their lives.
It's our right to express what is within us without being afraid of the army or policemen locking us away. Enough. It's our right to have change. It's our right to see something new.
The army seems to backing them to the hilt. The presence of the armed forces in the streets is for your benefit, said a broadcast on the government-owned Nile TV. The army will not use force against the people of Egypt, a point which appeared to give strength to the opposition.
And I've been talking to some of the leaders today. I think they are not going to let go until they see the back of Mubarak, frankly. And the earlier he would do that, the better.
But the army was also trying to limit access to Tahrir Square. People were searched, bags were opened, there were army personnel moving among the crowds. The demonstrations are exacting a heavy price. People don't have food, rail services remain suspended, banks and ATMs are shut, and the internet is jammed. Mobile phone services are down.
If this continues, how are we going to afford living? We have no money left from our salaries.
The despair and anger of ordinary Egyptians has put President Mubarak on the defensive. But it's not clear he is ready to hang up his boots. In fact, it may take more than demonstrations to send him home. In New Delhi, Altamash Hashmi.
Hosni Mubarak, after 30 years of unbroken rule, is now tottering because of a people's revolution like never before. It is seismic. It is an earthquake. It will have monumental effects in the Arab world. The revolt in Egypt, is it a threat to the global order, to the order that the United States has laid down in the Middle East? That's the question we're asking. And who better to tell us about this, but to talk about the international implications of the Egypt crisis? We have with us Fareed Zakaria, editor-at-large of Time magazine. Fareed Zakaria is talking to us. Fareed, the big question that everyone is actually asking is that what is this about? Is it economic? Is it political? In your opinion, how do you read this phenomenal event?
Sagarika, that's a very good question. A lot of people have speculated about unemployment, social conditions. These are all true, of course, but as you know, India is poorer than Egypt. I think fundamentally this is about a very repressive regime that had maintained a kind of iron grip on Egypt and Egyptian society, that had recently been opening up the economy. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Both Tunisia and Egypt had been growing economically. Tunisia at 5%, Egypt at 6.5%. So that stirred things up. It raised expectations. It opened up some space in civil society. And it turned out that that, combined with the fact that politically there was no opening, there was in fact even more repression, produced a kind of explosive cocktail.
Farid, some analysts have called this subaltern Islamism, that this is a broad-based struggle, but it's led by Islam. It has that Islamic fervor. Do you agree with that analysis?
No, I don't agree, Sagarika. I think that by and large, what you see here is a middle class or perhaps lower middle class revolt. But it seems pretty broad-based. All we can do is look at the faces of the protesters and read the reports. They are not Islamist. You do not see many green banners. There is a chant going around the protests at Tahrir Square in Cairo. You know, the Islamic fundamentalists have a slogan which is Islam is the solution. And the slogan being used in Cairo right now is Tunisia is the solution, meaning end the dictatorship, and that is the solution. So they're very pointedly not using Islamic symbols, signs, protests. I think this is, generally speaking, a pretty broad urban movement. We don't know enough about rural areas, but it does not seem to me that there is enough evidence to suggest that this is an Islamic revolution in any sense.
And what about the role of the United States? Why does the United States seem a little bit unsure? Obama actually just making a very ambiguous statement that violence should not be used by the protesters or by the regime. Is the United States being slow-footed in its dealing with the situation?
Look, the United States is in a difficult position. Imagine the alternative scenario. That is, at the first sign of street protests, the United States were to unceremoniously dump an ally of 30 years who had made peace with Israel, had battled Al-Qaeda, had fought other Islamic terrorists, had brokered deals with the Palestinian Authority and helped the Palestinians negotiate with the Israelis, had tried to moderate Hamas. In other words, Egypt has delivered on all kinds of issues, not just for the United States, but generally been a moderating force in the region. You have to remember that burden when you consider that Obama isn't out there dancing on the streets and calling for Mubarak's resignation. I think that he is trying to steer a course where he recognizes the aspirations of the Egyptian people. He pushes the regime to do the right thing. I would agree with you, he's probably one step too slow. In my view, I don't care about the public statements. I think that President Obama needs to make one phone call, and it can be done privately. But that phone call needs to be to Hosni Mubarak to tell him that he really cannot remain president of Egypt. How he manages that process, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, it doesn't have to be immediate, he may not have to flee the country, but ultimately the game is up for Mubarak, and the sooner Obama uses his influence to make that clear to him, the better.
Farid Zakaria, you're telling us that the game is up for Mubarak, and the sooner Obama actually makes that possible, the better it is, in fact, for the situation. But there are shockwaves in the Arab world. A key ally like Turkey has asked Mubarak to listen to the people, yet he's refusing to resign. So do you think that this time he will have to step down, although he's not going to give in too easily?
I really don't think there is a serious scenario in which he can continue to be president. Because first of all, these protests are real, they're large, they're escalating. But perhaps as importantly, there is another forcing event, which is that there is an election due to be held in Egypt in September. So Mubarak, in order to stay in office on the terms of Egypt's own, somewhat phony constitution, he has to run. Now, can you imagine in the circumstances we're witnessing right now that Mubarak would be able to run again in another staged election? It seems highly unlikely. So I think that the choices are Mubarak stays for a few months or he goes sooner than that. I really don't see how he is able to last much longer than that. The broader question is, will the military try to reconstitute the regime without Mubarak, or will they genuinely allow for an opening to a democratic Egypt?
That's a very, very important question, actually, Farid. And brings me to the next question is that, is this protest going to be a transition into democracy? Or is it going to be a transition to some sort of different form of government that the military may want or that the other forces involved in the movement may want? What is the future of Egypt going to be?
Sagarika, that's the million-dollar question or the 1,000 crore rupee question. I think that so far what we are seeing in Egypt does not look like an Islamic revolution. It is worth pointing out that most independent analyses and polls suggest that the Muslim Brotherhood, the main Islamic party, does not have more than about 25% of the support. But I think it is crucial, if Egypt is going to make some kind of transition, that this transition be orderly and carefully planned, that there first be a constitution written that protects individual rights, minority interests, the rule of law, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, that courts be mandated to be able to protect these things, and that an electoral system be set up that does not allow for the capture by any one group, by the capture by a minority, and all this needs to be worked out pretty carefully. So I would say, as long as Egypt can go through a transitional phase where it prepares itself for a democracy, I think it is an ancient civilization with a sophisticated civil society. It's difficult for me to imagine that it won't be able to have some form of democracy. Will it be, will it be Westminster-style democracy? Will it look like France and England? Probably not. You look at Iraq; it can be messy and chaotic. But I think that probably for most Egyptians, it will be a step forward after 30 years of very, very tight authoritarian rule.
And given, as you mentioned, the centrality of Egypt in the Arab world, Tunisia has already taken place. The dictatorial ruler there has been driven out. Now Egypt. Do you see the protests spreading to the monarchies of the Gulf, to Jordan? Do you see the whole area being engulfed in volatility now?
Egypt is the heart and soul of the Arab world. It is the largest country in the Arab world. It is the oldest civilization within the Arab world. It is, without any question, the place that every Arab looks to for cultural trends, for movies, for music. For Egypt to have this happen is going to be a seismic event. It's going to be an earthquake in the Arab system. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll see regimes fall like dominoes, because these regimes are different and are constituted differently. The Saudi monarchy, for instance, has a very peculiar but apparently stable compact with its people. It bribes them lavishly, and there seems to be some stability born of that. But I think everywhere in the Arab world, people are going to ask much harder and deeper questions. Why don't we have a free press? Why don't we have freedom of information? Why don't we have freedom of assembly and political organizations? Why aren't our leaders more accountable? And I think that is going to be unavoidable, probably no matter what happens. Because the one scenario we haven't talked about, Sagarika, is, could you imagine a real crackdown by the military? I think it's highly unlikely, but the effect of that would also be seismic. It would be Tiananmen Square times 10. Because it would send a signal that the only way these regimes can stay in power is to kill lots of people, which would be in its own way a very sobering and bitter message to the Arab world. But I think more likely than not, what you will see is a regime change in Egypt which will reverberate throughout the Arab world.
Fareed Zakaria, they're bringing us his very, very valuable insights into the Egypt situation. Thanks very much indeed. It's an earthquake in the Arab world. You've used the word seismic, you've used the word phenomenal, and you've used the word of impactful across the region. It is a moment that we are privileged to witness. It is a revolution that is occurring in an ancient land of the pharaohs, but also a highly modern movement sparked by the internet. And what better moment but to quote the words of our first Prime Minister: a moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends and when the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance. Jawaharlal Nehru said this about India, but it is equally true perhaps of Egypt. Let's take a short break and come back. In the ancient land of the pharaohs, it's a digital revolution. The waters of the Nile are turbulent. Revolution in Egypt. Millions are marching in Tahrir Square. Hosni Mubarak's game is up. People power has forced the demise of a 30-year-old authoritarian regime as millions are demanding change. The face of this movement is the quiet, unassuming international diplomat, Nobel Prize winner Mohammad El-Baradei. Let's hear from him.
I think if they do that, that would be a bloody country. I mean, people now, as you have seen, they have been empowered. I mean, they have been beaten, and they are not going to stop short of change of regime, change of Mubarak.
And if there is a transitional government, would you run for president?
This is not, and again, Anson, this is not my priority at all. At this stage, moderate, democratic, and I will have achieved the last mission of my life, if you like. But as I always said, if people want me to run, I will not let them down. But that's not my priority.
Can you predict what's going to happen? I mean, do you have a sense of if Mubarak leaves, when he might do that?
I think within the next 2 weeks, things has to be clear. And I think if within the next 2 weeks, things are not clear, I am afraid that things will escalate. There is no, as I said, there's no going down.
But if there's one individual who is the face of this change, it is Mohammad El-Baradei. But the movement, as we have been emphasizing, is largely leaderless. Joining us to tell us what they make of this phenomenon in Egypt, Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, joining us. Chinmay Gharekan, former diplomat and India's Special Envoy to West Asia, joining us. Thanks very much, gentlemen, indeed. Mr. Gharekan, you had a wonderful article in The Hindu today saying that this is a moment where India must support the kind of democratic protest that is happening there. What is your reading? Is as Fareed Zakaria said, is the game up for Hosni Mubarak?
Yes, I think there should be no doubt about that. If at all Mr. Mubarak survives or wants to survive, and I'm not talking of physical survival, I hope it won't come to that, but if he wants to survive at all in office in some shape, then he will have to give up all his power to the people of the country. But I think people now seem to be in such a mood that they don't want Mubarak in any capacity whatsoever. And as Mohammad El-Baradei said, Mr. Mubarak should better leave the country. I don't agree with Baradei that things must clarify within 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks sounds to me like too long a time period for things to move quickly.
And Ambassador Sibal, what is your reading? What will a regime change in Egypt mean for India?
I think there's not that much potential consequences for a country like India, but for the region there will be tremendous consequences, because Egypt is the political and cultural fulcrum of the region. And then the whole Arab-Israeli peace process is centered around peace between Egypt and Israel. Plus, Egypt is extremely important for the entire US and Western strategy in the Middle East. So any destabilization of Egypt can have serious consequences for peace and stability in the region, especially as the Egyptian internal situation has not been prepared for change.
That's interesting. The Egyptian internal situation is not prepared for change. So it's by no means clear whether the movement is necessarily going to lead to a democratic form of government when Egypt has no experience of democracy, as you're saying. Is that what worries you to some extent about this movement?
There is no guarantee that the change will move in the direction of democracy. The advantage that the parties most poised to take advantage of the current situation seem to be the better organized party with popular support because of their social activities and social work, seem to be the parties which can be put under the rubric of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Chinmay Gharekan, respond to what Kanwal Sibal is saying, that we're celebrating the revolution and we're celebrating people's power, but the beneficiary ultimately of this people power could be the Islamic Brotherhood, because they are the ones with the presence on the ground.
Well, I think that it is quite possible that there will be democracy in the country. This is a people's revolution, and the people are not going to accept anything less than a democratic form of government. People's empowerment must come out of this, what is going on, this turbulence in Egypt. So I'm not so pessimistic about what will emerge. But yes, I think Ambassador Sibal is right that the best organized form or force in the country is Muslim Brotherhood. But that does not mean that Muslim Brotherhood is the most popular movement or organization in the country. All experts, and I think even Farid Zakaria said just a few minutes ago, that Muslim Brotherhood does not have more than 25% support among the people of the country. So, but since they are better organized than others, I think they will take advantage. It stands to reason that they will take advantage. But you will notice that they have kept themselves in the background. They have not advocated violence, and in fact they have declared in the past that they are against the use of violent methods. So I think we in India don't need to worry too much, even if Muslim Brotherhood forms part of the next dispensation in Cairo. But maybe others in the West, United States, etc., they may have more reason to feel nervous at the prospect of Muslim Brotherhood coming to power.
And that's interesting that you say that we don't need to feel nervous. Ambassador Sibal, if Mohammed al-Baradei is being seen as the only possible face of this change, he's likely to be a friend of India. India can be reassured that someone as moderate as he is certainly not going to be radical or in any way threatening to India's interests.
Yes, certainly. One would wish that people like him, enlightened people, moderate people, pro-democratic thinking people, stay in power. But frankly, what is Mohammed al-Baradei is the depth of his political support in the country. He might be an attractive figure, but attractive to whom? Will he be able to mobilize the political parties and the political class and everybody else around him sufficiently to ward off parties like the Muslim Brotherhood, who for decades have worked on the ground?
It's Mohammed al-Baradei. Will he be able to have that political capital to ward off the Islamic Brotherhood? Last word to Chinmay Ghare Khan. Should India fear or celebrate what's happening in Egypt?
We don't have to fear at all. And I think as a democratic country, we can only celebrate the success of people in another country. I think after all we do stand for democracy, for people's rights, freedom of expression, assembly, and so on and so forth. So we certainly don't need to be nervous about any possible change, and definitely there will be a change in Cairo, in Egypt. We don't need to shout from the rooftops that yes, we are very happy, very happy, etc. But if I may add just a little point about al-Baradei, I think Mohammed al-Baradei, as Ambassador Sibal said, certainly presents a moderate, an acceptable face of the Egyptian people. But I think the West or all the others will have to be very careful, because if we all go on shouting that yes, Baradei, the right man for the job, the best man for the job, and especially if the United States and others keep pleading or arguing in favor of Baradei, that may well turn out to be a kiss of death for Baradei.
Right.
So it's best left to the people of Egypt quietly and let them decide whom they want, even as a transitional, head of state or head of government.
Right, those are very wise words, in fact, and you've written that precisely in your article today, saying India should support the democratic movement but not meddle and make any preferences clear. Thanks very much indeed, Kanwal Sibal, Chinmay Ghare Khan. Well, it is a Facebook and Twitter revolution in the ancient land of the pharaohs and pyramids, and it is a momentous event, a phenomenal event which we are witnessing on live television as Egypt and 2 million people force out a 30-year-old authoritarian regime and demand change. Is the revolution in Egypt a threat to the order that now exists in the Middle East and in the world in general? 70 saying yes, it is a time of change. Watch this space. Thanks for watching.